I still remember the smell of the lake that weekend. Pine and wet wood and something metallic in the air, the way it gets before a storm that never comes. We'd been at the cottage for a week, Mom, me, and my baby brother in his playpen. It was the kind of vacation where nothing happens, and that's exactly what you want. We got back to the house late Sunday afternoon. Mom carried groceries while I brought in the duffel bags, and I remember thinking how the place smelled different after being empty. Stale air and carpet dust. My brother was fussy, overtired from the drive, and Mom put him down early while I unpacked in my room. The back door had a window in it, just a regular window, the kind with 4 panes of glass and a thin wooden frame between them. I'd looked through it 1,000 times while doing dishes or waiting for the kettle. I never thought about how easy it would be to break. That night, I fell asleep on the couch watching TV. Mom said I could stay up since it was still technically vacation, and I was 13 old enough that sleeping on the couch felt like a small freedom. The last thing I remember clearly was the blue glow of the television and the sound of a commercial for car insurance. Something about protecting what matters most. I don't know what time it was when the glass broke. I've tried to remember. The police asked me so many times, but there's just nothing. A gap where memory should be. The sound must have been loud. 4 panes of glass shattering, wood splintering. But I don't recall it. I don't recall waking up. I don't recall seeing anything. Mom does, though. Or she did. She was in her bedroom when it happened. She heard it clearly. Said later it sounded like someone had thrown a rock through the door. She got up to check. And then there's another gap, a bigger one, because what happened next is something she doesn't remember either. Yeah, remember, the doctors explained it to me years later, how severe head trauma can erase things, how the brain protects itself by refusing to store certain moments. She saw him. I know she did. She was found in the hallway between her room and mine, which means she made it that far. The police told us she was beaten badly, repeatedly with something heavy. They found her there unconscious, her skull fractured in 3 places. My brother slept through it. 9 months old, in his crib in the room next to Mom's. Didn't cry, didn't wake. When they found him the next morning, he was asleep on his stomach, his little fists curled under his chin. I wasn't in the house, that's what they told me when I woke up in the hospital. You weren't inside. They found you in the backyard, near the fence line where the property meets the woods. I remember the way the officer said it, careful and slow, like he was talking to someone much younger than 13. I asked him what I was doing out there. He didn't answer right away, just looked at me with this expression I didn't understand then, but I do now. Pity and something else. Dread, maybe. I don't remember going outside. I don't remember the grass under my feet or the night air or the stars. I don't remember any of it. There's just the couch, the blue television light, the car insurance commercial, and then the hospital fluorescence and the officer's face and the slow realization that something was very, very wrong. They asked me questions for days, weeks. Did you see anyone? Hear anything? Did someone call your name? Did you wake up at all? I kept telling them the same thing. I don't know. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I don't remember. Mom was in the ICU for 11 days. When she finally woke up, they asked her the same questions, and she gave them the same answers. I don't know. I don't remember. I'm sorry. But here's the thing they told us later. The thing that sits in my chest like a stone. She made it to the hallway. She was found between her bedroom and mine, facing the living room, which means she saw who did it. She had to have seen him standing there in our kitchen. The back door window shattered behind him, glass on the linoleum. She looked at his face. She saw him clearly enough to try to stop him, and then he hit her so hard, so many times, that her brain erased him completely. The police tried everything: hypnosis, therapy, witness recovery specialists. But the memory was just gone, deleted, like someone had taken an eraser to that exact moment and left everything else intact. She remembers going to bed. She remembers hearing the glass break. And then she remembers waking up in the hospital 3 days later. There was evidence. A shoe print in the kitchen left in something they didn't tell me about until I was older. Nike sneakers, size 11, a specific tread pattern. They interviewed over 1,500 people, took DNA samples, followed leads across 3 counties, but no arrests, no suspects, no answers. We moved 6 weeks after it happened. Mom's sister came and packed up the house while we stayed at a hotel near the hospital. I never went back inside. Never saw my room again, or the couch, or the back door with its broken window. The new place was in a different town, a different school district. Mom got a security system installed before we even moved the furniture in. Cameras on every door, motion sensors in the yard, panic buttons in each bedroom. My brother's crib went in Mom's room, and mine was directly across the hall. She left both doors open at night, always. For a while, I thought that not remembering was a blessing. I'd hear other kids at school talking about scary movies or bad dreams, and I'd think, at least I don't have to see it when I close my eyes. At least it's just blank space. But blank space is its own kind of horror, because I know something happened in that gap. I know I went from the couch to the backyard, and I don't know how or why. Did I wake up? Did I hear something? Did someone carry me? Was I running? The police never said exactly where in the backyard they found me, just near the fence line. But I've thought about that phrase 10,000 times. Near the fence line, not at the back door. Not on the porch, all the way across the yard, near the woods, like I was trying to get away, or like someone was taking me there. They found tool marks on the fence, they told us years later, fresh scratches in the wood, like someone had tried to climb over or pull something through. The forensics team photographed them, cataloged them, but nothing came of it. There's a detail I didn't learn until I was 23. I was looking through the old case files. They'd given Mom a copy, stored in a banker's box in her closet, and I found the incident report. Under victimology, there was a note I'd never seen before. Victim appeared to have been dragged. Grass stains on back of nightgown and heels. Abrasions consistent with being pulled across lawn. I read it 3 times before I understood what it meant. I didn't walk to the fence line, someone dragged me there. I called Mom that night, asked her if she knew. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said yes, she'd known. The police had told her. They just didn't want to tell me when I was younger. I asked her why they thought someone would drag me all the way across the yard and then just leave me there. She didn't answer, but I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, and I knew she'd thought about it too. Thought about it the same way I was thinking about it now. He wasn't finished. Something interrupted him, a noise, a light, a car passing by. Something made him stop and leave before he could. I didn't let myself finish the thought. Mom still doesn't remember. 27 years later, and that gap is still there, a black hole in the middle of her memory where a face should be. The detectives told her it might come back someday. A smell, a sound, some small trigger that unlocks it, but it never has. And I still don't remember either. I don't remember waking up. Don't remember the fear or the confusion or the moment I realized something was wrong. Just the couch, the blue light, the car insurance commercial, and then the hospital. Sometimes I wonder if my brain is protecting me too, if there's something in that gap that I'm not supposed to see. Because there are moments, rare, late at night when I'm half asleep, when I almost remember something. Not an image or a sound, just a feeling, the feeling of being pulled, of grass against my back and the sky above me, and something very strong holding my wrists. And the smell, pine and wet wood and something metallic, just like the lake. But then it's gone, and I'm awake, and it's just a feeling, not a memory. Never quite a memory. The case is still open, technically. There's a detective who calls Mom every few years to check in, see if anything's changed. The reward is still active. $50,000 for information leading to an arrest. But it's been almost 3 decades. Whoever broke through that back door window and stepped into our kitchen and saw my mother in the hallway, whoever left that shoe print and those tool marks on the fence, he's still out there. And he knows exactly what happened that night. He's the only one who does, I don't go to lakes anymore. Can't stand the smell of pine, and I never, ever sleep on the couch. I tell people it's a bad habit, that it hurts my back. But really, it's because every time I close my eyes on a couch, I'm 13 again. And somewhere in the gap between sleeping and waking, there's glass breaking and footsteps in the kitchen, and someone standing in the dark, looking at me. And I don't remember what happens next. I think that's worse than remembering, because I know that for at least a few moments, I was awake. I had to be. You don't end up at the fence line without waking up first, which means I saw him too, and my brain decided that whatever I saw that night was something I should never, ever be allowed to remember. My dad was in jail the day my sister disappeared. Stupid thing to lead with, but it matters. It's the reason she was home alone. The reason Mom and my brother were across town visiting him. The reason the house was empty when Christine got off the school bus that afternoon. I wasn't born yet. This was 1984, October, but I've heard the story so many times it almost feels like a memory. The way Mom tells it, they'd only been gone 2 hours. 2 hours. Christine was 9, old enough to be home alone for a little while. Responsible, good grades, never got in trouble. She'd been given one instruction: come straight home after school, lock the door, and wait. Mom would be back by dinner. Christine did come home. Her backpack was on the kitchen table when they returned at 4:15. Her shoes were by the door, neatly placed side by side the way she always left them. The door was unlocked. But Christine was gone. They searched the house first, checked her room, the bathroom, the basement, called her name. Mom said she remembers standing in the kitchen, looking at that backpack, and feeling her stomach drop, because Christine wouldn't just leave, wouldn't go to a friend's house without permission, wouldn't break the one rule she'd been given. They called the police at 4:30. By 5 o'clock, there were officers going door to door, asking neighbors if they'd seen a 9-year-old girl, blonde hair, blue jacket. No one had. The bus driver remembered her getting off at the usual stop, walking toward the house. After that, nothing. They found her 3 months later, New Year's Eve. A farmer was checking his back field, 55 kilometers away from our town, and saw something near the fence line. I don't know all the details. Mom won't tell me, and I've never pushed. But I know it was bad. I know she'd been there a while, and I know that whoever took her didn't just take her. The police interviewed everyone: friends, family, neighbors, teachers. They looked at registered offenders in the area, ran background checks, followed every lead. And eventually, they arrested someone, Guy Paul Morin. He lived next door. I remember Mom talking about him when I was older, her voice tight and angry. She said he was strange, quiet, kept bees, played the clarinet at odd hours, the kind of person you notice because he doesn't quite fit. The trial was huge, national news. Everyone was so sure. The prosecutor said, Morin had opportunity, proximity, motive. They had fiber evidence, witness testimony. He was convicted in 1992, sentenced to life. Mom said she felt relief at first, like she could finally breathe. The monster had a name and a face and a prison cell, and that was supposed to mean something. Supposed to mean it was over. But then the appeal started. New lawyers, new evidence, new questions. And in 1995, DNA testing, brand new technology back then, proved he didn't do it. Guy Paul Morin was innocent. They let him out, apologized, paid him money. But the damage was done to him, to us, to everyone. Because if it wasn't Morin, then who was it? The case went cold. Years passed. I grew up hearing Christine's name, but never really knowing her. She was a gap in our family, a missing piece. Mom kept her room the same for a long time, until I was in high school. Even now, there's a framed picture in the hallway. Christine at her 9th birthday party, smiling at the camera, holding a piece of cake. I used to walk past it every day without really looking. It was just part of the house, like the wallpaper or the loose floorboard in the hallway. But after what happened in 2020, I can't stop looking at it. Because they found him. 36 years after Christine disappeared, they finally found him. His name was Calvin Hoover. And the worst part, the part that still makes my stomach turn, is that we knew him. He worked with my dad. They were friends. His wife babysat Christine sometimes. He'd been at our house for dinners, birthdays, barbecues. He was in the search party that looked for her after she vanished, helped put up flyers, talked to reporters, hugged my mom at the funeral, and the whole time he knew. He knew exactly where she was, knew what he'd done, knew that every second my family spent searching and hoping and praying was a lie because Christine was already gone and he was the reason why. The police said they used genetic genealogy to identify him, submitted DNA from the crime scene to a database, built a family tree, and narrowed it down. It took months, but they were sure. Calvin Hoover killed my sister. Except by the time they had the evidence, Hoover was dead. He'd killed himself in 2015, 5 years before they identified him, never faced trial, never confessed, never had to look my mother in the eye and explain why. Mom didn't cry when they told her. I was there, sitting next to her in the living room while the detective explained everything. She just nodded slowly, her hands folded in her lap, and said, "I knew him. We knew him." The detective said yes, they were aware. That's what made it so difficult. After he left, Mom sat on the couch for a long time without moving. I asked if she wanted tea or water, or if I should call someone. She shook her head. Then she said, "He held her when she was a baby." I didn't know what to say to that. He came to the hospital the day she was born, brought flowers, held her while I filled out paperwork. I have a photo somewhere, him smiling, holding Christine in a blue blanket. She looked at me then, and her eyes were dry, but there was something hollow in them, something broken. "How do you do that?" she asked. "How do you hold someone's baby?" And then she didn't finish, didn't need to. I started thinking about the timeline after that. Couldn't help it. October 3rd, 1984. Christine disappeared between 3:30 and 4:15. Hoover worked with my dad, which means he knew Dad was in jail, knew Mom would be visiting, knew Christine would be home alone. He'd been to our house dozens of times, knew the layout, the schedule, the routines, knew which door we usually left unlocked, knew Christine trusted him. The police think he was waiting, that he saw the school bus drop her off, watched her go inside, and then followed. Maybe knocked on the door, maybe just walked in. Either way, Christine wouldn't have been afraid, not at first. Because it was Mr. Hoover, Dad's friend from work. They found her 55 kilometers away. That's almost an hour's drive. Which means he put her in his car, alive or already gone, I don't know, and drove past farms and forests and small towns where people were going about their normal afternoons and no one saw anything wrong. He dumped her in a field and went home. Kissed his wife, had dinner, slept in his bed. And the next day when Mom called him crying, asking if he'd seen Christine, he said, "No, I'm so sorry," and offered to help search. For 3 months he pretended, looked my mother in the face and lied. Stood in our living room during the wake and accepted condolences, told reporters he hoped they'd find whoever did this. And then he just lived, got up every day, went to work, came home. For 31 years, he lived a normal life while my family fell apart. I wonder if he thought about her. If there were moments late at night when he remembered what he'd done. Or if it was just something that happened once, a terrible thing he filed away and moved past. The detective said there was no evidence Hoover did this to anyone else. No other victims, no similar crimes. Just Christine. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Mom started having nightmares after the identification. She'd wake up gasping, and when I'd ask what she dreamed about, she'd shake her head. But once she told me, she dreamed she was at a barbecue in our backyard, 1983 or 84, and Hoover was there, holding a beer, laughing at something my dad said. And in the dream, Christine ran past him chasing a ball, and he watched her. Just watched. And Mom said she could feel it, even in the dream. That he was already thinking about it, already planning. I told her it was just a dream, that we can't know what he was thinking. But she looked at me and said, "He came to the funeral, sat 3 rows behind us." I remember turning around and seeing him, and he looked sad, genuinely sad. How do you fake that? I didn't have an answer. The house where Christine disappeared is still there. Different family lives in it now. I drove past it once, a few years ago, and it looked so normal. Tidy lawn, flowers in the front garden, a bike lying on its side near the driveway. Just a house. You never know. But I kept thinking about that afternoon. Christine walking up the driveway, unlocking the door, dropping her backpack on the kitchen table. And then, what? A knock? Footsteps behind her? Did she have time to be scared? The police never said exactly what happened inside the house, if there was a struggle, or if he just took her. But her shoes were by the door, neatly placed, which makes me think she didn't fight, didn't run, because why would she? It was someone she knew, someone safe. I think that's what haunts Mom the most, not the violence, though that's horrific enough, but the betrayal. That Christine trusted him, that she probably smiled when she saw him, maybe even felt relieved that an adult was there, and he used that. Used her trust, her innocence, her belief that grown-ups were safe. Hoover's wife gave an interview after the identification, said she had no idea, that he never showed any signs, never acted strange. She'd lived with him for decades, slept beside him every night, and never suspected. The police asked if there was anything unusual in his behavior, any guilt or paranoia, and she said no, he was just normal. That's almost worse, that he didn't crack, didn't spiral, just folded Christine's murder into his life like a dark little secret and carried on. There's a victim services counselor who talks to us sometimes. She said cases like this, where the perpetrator is someone close, someone trusted, leave a different kind of wound. Because it's not just grief, it's contamination. Every memory of him is poisoned now. Every photo, every holiday, every casual conversation, all of it is rewritten. Mom threw out pictures, boxes of them. Any photo with Hoover in it went in the garbage. I watched her do it one afternoon, her jaw tight, tearing them in half before dropping them in the bin. When she got to the one from the hospital, him holding baby Christine, she stared at it for a long time. And then she tore it up too. I asked if you wanted to keep it just in case. Document, evidence, something. She said no, she didn't want his face in her house. The detective told us Hoover had searched for Christine, literally walked the fields and forests, calling her name, knowing she wouldn't answer because he knew exactly where she was. That kind of cruelty isn't impulsive, it's deliberate. And I keep coming back to the same question. Why? Why Christine? Why that day? Why any of it? There's no answer. Hoover's dead, and whatever his reasons were, he took them with him. The case is officially closed now. Solved, technically, even though there was no trial, no justice. Just a name and a confirmation and a grave no one in my family will ever visit. I asked Mom once if she felt closure. She laughed. But there was no humor in it. She said, "Closure is a myth people tell you to make you feel better. That you don't close something like this. You just learn to live around the hole." Christine would be 49 now. I try to imagine what she'd be like. If she'd be married, have kids, what she'd do for work. But I can't picture it. She's frozen at 9 years old, forever in that blue jacket, smiling in the school photo on Mom's mantle. And Hoover's gone, and the truth is buried with him, and all we're left with is the knowledge that someone we trusted, someone we welcomed into our home, was a monster the entire time. And we never knew. I don't think that's something you recover from. I think it just becomes part of you, like scar tissue. Mom still keeps the door locked, always, even when she's home, even during the day. And sometimes I'll see her looking out the front window, watching the street, and I know what she's thinking. She's thinking about that afternoon, about Christine's shoes by the door and her backpack on the table, about the 2 hours they were gone, and the man who knew they'd be gone, and the little girl who trusted him. And I know she's wondering what would have happened if they'd stayed home that day, if she'd brought Christine with her to visit Dad, if she'd asked a neighbor to watch her, if Hoover had knocked and no one had answered, if, but they didn't and he did and Christine's gone, and all we have left is the knowing and the picture in the hallway, and the feeling that we'll never be safe again. Not really. Because the worst things don't come from strangers in the dark. They come from people you know, people you trust, people who smile at you and hold your baby and wait for the exact right moment to take everything away. I moved to Smiths Falls in the spring of 2022. Small town, about 9,000 people, the kind of place where you recognize faces at the grocery store, even if you don't know names. I took a job at the mechanic shop on Beckwith Street. Decent pay, quiet work, and the owner didn't ask too many questions about why I was starting over somewhere new. The shop had 3 regulars who'd come in most weeks: Lawrence, Robbie, and Steve. They knew each other, hung around together sometimes. Not best friends exactly, but connected in that way small town people are, overlapping circles, mutual acquaintances, the same bars and coffee shops. Lawrence was the oldest, early 40s, drove a pickup that needed constant work. Friendly guy, always had a story. Robbie was younger, maybe mid-30s, quieter. And Steve had this nervous energy, talked fast, laughed at his own jokes. They'd show up separately, but I'd see them outside sometimes, standing in the parking lot talking, smoking cigarettes. I remember thinking they seemed like any other guys in a town like this. Nothing remarkable, nothing that would make you look twice. Lawrence stopped coming in that fall. September, maybe early October. I didn't think much of it at first. People move, get their cars fixed elsewhere, whatever. But then one afternoon, Robbie came in for an oil change, and I asked how Lawrence was doing. Robbie went quiet. Looked at me for a second, then said, "You didn't hear?" I said no. He just shook his head and said Lawrence was gone. Didn't elaborate. Paid for the oil change and left. I asked my boss about it later. He was local, knew everyone. He lowered his voice, even though we were alone in the shop, and said Lawrence had disappeared. No one had seen him in weeks. Family reported it, police were looking into it, but there wasn't much to go on. "What do you mean disappeared?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just gone. Truck still at his place. Wallet, phone, everything. What, no Lawrence?" But no Lawrence. The way he said it made my skin prickle. Not like he was scared exactly, more like he was being careful about what he said. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention to conversations at the coffee shop, the diner, the bar. Small towns talk, and Smiths Falls was definitely talking. But it was strange talk. Vague. People would mention Lawrence and then change the subject quickly, or they'd say something like, "I heard things," and then go quiet when someone else walked by. I got the feeling there were details people knew but weren't saying. Not to outsiders like me anyway. Robbie kept coming to the shop through October. He seemed more on edge each time, distracted. One afternoon, he was waiting for his car, and I tried to make conversation, asked if there was any news about Lawrence. He looked at me with this expression I couldn't read. Then he said, "You should probably stop asking about that. It wasn't a threat." More like advice, like he was trying to help me. "Why?" I asked. He didn't answer, just looked out the window at the street, jaw tight. The last time I saw Robbie was mid-October. He came in for a tire rotation, seemed jumpy, kept checking his phone. I asked if everything was okay, and he said, "Yeah, fine, just busy." But he didn't look fine. He looked like someone who wasn't sleeping. A week later, he didn't show up for his appointment. I called the number on file, went straight to voicemail, tried again the next day, same thing. And then I heard it at the coffee shop. Robbie Thompson was missing, same as Lawrence, just gone. Truck still parked at his place on Albert Street, no sign of where he went or why. Police were investigating, asking questions, but no one seemed to have answers. Or if they did, they weren't sharing them. I remember standing at the counter, holding my coffee, listening to 2 older women talk about it in hushed voices. One of them said, "That's 2 now." And the other one glanced around nervously and said, "Don't. Just that. Don't." Like even mentioning the patter was dangerous. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Robbie's face the last time I saw him, the way he kept checking his phone, the jumpiness. He'd seemed afraid, I realized, not just stressed or distracted, actually afraid. I started putting pieces together. Lawrence and Robbie knew each other. Both disappeared within weeks. Both left everything behind: vehicles, belongings, no explanation. And both had been acting strange before it happened, according to people who knew them better than I did. The police were tight-lipped about it. Put out a missing person notice, did interviews, but didn't say much publicly. The local paper ran a story, but it was basic information, nothing about how they might be connected or what investigators thought happened. People talked. Not openly, not in detail, but in that careful small-town way where everyone knows something, but no one wants to say it directly. I heard the name Steve Tate come up a few times. Someone at the bar mentioned he'd been friends with both Lawrence and Robbie. Someone else said Steve was keeping his head down, not going out much. I didn't know Steve well. He'd only been to the shop twice, and we'd barely talked. But I remembered him, the nervous energy, the fast talking. On November 4th, Steve was reported missing too. Last seen near his house on Lavinia Street in the early morning hours. Just disappeared like the others. No explanation, no note, nothing. 3 men, 3 friends, 3 disappearances in 14 months. And the police said there was no threat to public safety. I remember reading that statement online and feeling my stomach drop. Because what does that mean exactly? That they know who's responsible and that person isn't dangerous to anyone else? Or that these weren't random? That there's some specific reason these 3 men were targeted? Either way, it felt like a lie. Or at least not the whole truth, because 3 people don't just vanish from a town of 9,000 without something being very, very wrong. Steve Tate wasn't missing for long. They found his body on November 12th in a ditch along Highway 15 just north of town. I heard about it the same way everyone did. Someone mentioned it at the shop. Word spread fast. The police didn't release much information. Just that a body had been found, identified as Steve Tate, and the death was being investigated. No cause of death, no circumstances. Just that standard line again, no threat to public safety. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to think the police knew something we didn't, that they were just being careful about what they said publicly. But the way people in town reacted told a different story. The coffee shop was quieter. Conversations at the bar were muted, cautious. People looked at each other differently, like they were reassessing who they could trust. There was this low-level anxiety humming through everything, and it got worse every day. I started hearing rumors, nothing concrete, just fragments. Someone said they heard Steve's body was in bad shape. Someone else said the police had brought in outside investigators. Another person mentioned that Lawrence and Robbie might not be missing at all. Might be. They didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. One night I was at the bar, trying to mind my own business, when an older guy sat down next to me. Local, worked construction. I'd seen him around. He was drunk, or close to it, and he leaned over and said, "You knew them, didn't you?" The 3 guys. I said I knew them a little, from the shop. He nodded slowly, staring at his beer. Then he said, "People are saying things. What kind of things?" He looked at me, eyes bloodshot and tired. Bad things. About what happened to Lawrence. About what they found. Found where? He shook his head. I don't know if it's true. But people are talking like it's an open secret. Like everyone knows, but no one's saying it out loud. Saying what? He finished his beer, set the glass down carefully. That someone did something terrible. And that it didn't just happen once. Then he got up and left, and I sat there feeling cold all over. I tried to find out more, but it was like hitting a wall. People would start to say something, then catch themselves and change the subject. Or they'd tell me to stop asking questions, that it wasn't safe to be too curious. That phrase came up a lot. Not safe. The police presence increased. I'd see cruisers parked on side streets, officers walking around downtown talking to people, but still no arrests. No press conferences, no answers, and Lawrence and Robbie were still missing. I started wondering if they'd ever be found, or if they were already found and we just didn't know it yet. There was one afternoon in late November when I was closing up the shop and a woman came in. Mid-40s, looked exhausted. She asked if I knew Lawrence Bertram. I said yes, a little. She told me she was his sister, that the family was still searching, still hoping, but it was getting harder. She asked if Lawrence had ever mentioned anything strange, anyone bothering him, anything that seemed off. I told her no, I'm sorry. We mostly just talked about his truck. She nodded like she'd expected that answer. Then she said something that stuck with me. People in this town know more than they're saying. I can feel it. But everyone's scared. Scared of what? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. I don't know. But something happened here. Something worse than 3 men going missing, and everyone's pretending they don't see it. After she left, I stood in the empty shop for a while, just thinking. She was right. There was something underneath all of this, some layer of truth that no one wanted to touch. I started paying more attention after that. Noticing things, like how certain people avoided certain topics, how some names came up in connection with the case and then disappeared from conversation entirely, how there were parts of town people didn't go to as much anymore, and I started noticing the silences, the way a room would go quiet when someone mentioned Lawrence or Robbie or Steve, the way people would glance at each other before answering questions, like they were checking to see if it was safe to talk. It reminded me of something I'd read once, about how in small towns sometimes everyone knows the truth about something terrible, but no one will say it, because saying it means taking sides, means going against neighbors and friends, means risking becoming the next person people whisper about, so they stay quiet. And the truth just sits there, heavy and unspoken. By December, I was seriously considering leaving. The town felt different, wrong, like something had broken and no one knew how to fix it, so they were just pretending everything was normal while the cracks spread. But I kept thinking about those 3 men, Lawrence with his truck problems and his stories, Robbie with his quietness and his last warning to me, Steve with his nervous energy and his fast talking. They were just regular people, flawed probably, like anyone, but they didn't deserve whatever happened to them. And someone knows. That's what keeps me up at night, the certainty that in a town this small, someone saw something, heard something, knows something, but they're not talking. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they're complicit. Maybe they just don't want to get involved. Or maybe, and this is the thought that makes my skin crawl, maybe they're quiet because they know exactly how dangerous it is to speak up. Because 3 men are gone and 1 is confirmed dead, and the police say there's no threat to public safety. But we all know that's not true. We all know something is very wrong. We just don't know who to be afraid of. Could be anyone. Could be someone we see every day. Someone who pumps gas, makes coffee, fixes cars. Someone who smiles and waves and lives a completely normal life, except for the terrible thing they did. Or things. It's integral. Because if Steve was in bad shape when they found him, if those rumors are even partially true, then this wasn't quick, wasn't painless, wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. And if it happened to Steve, what happened to Lawrence and Robbie? I don't work at the shop anymore. I left Smiths Falls in January, found a job 2 towns over. I tell people I wanted a change of scenery, better pay, whatever. But really, I left because I couldn't stand the not knowing. Couldn't stand walking past the places those 3 men used to be and wondering what really happened to them. Couldn't stand the careful silences and the averted eyes and the feeling that everyone was lying by simply saying nothing. Sometimes I search online for updates. Check if there's been any news, any arrests, any answers. There never is. The case is still open technically, legal under investigation. But the trail's gone cold and people have moved on. And Smiths Falls is just another small Ontario town where bad things happened once and no one likes to talk about it. Except I can't move on. Because I remember Robbie's face that last day, the fear in his eyes. The way he told me to stop asking questions. Like he knew something was coming. Like he knew exactly what happened to Lawrence and knew it was going to happen to him too, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. And I think about Steve Tate lying in that ditch on Highway 15 and how he'd been reported missing only 8 days earlier. 8 days. What happened in those 8 days? Where was he? What was done to him? Was he alive the whole time? The police know more than they've said. Oh, Marger. But they're not sharing, and the investigation is stalled, and the only people who could tell us the truth are either dead or disappeared or too scared to speak. And that's how it ends, I guess. Not with answers or justice or closure, just with silence. And 3 empty chairs at the bar where 3 men used to sit. And the rest of us trying to pretend we don't notice the way the town feels different now. Like something was carved out of it, and we're all just walking around the edges of the hole, careful not to look down. Because if we look down, we might see what's really there, and I don't think any of us want to know. I know I don't. Haven't got any more. I worked as a park ranger in Algonquin for 3 summers during university. This was back in the early 2000s, and even then, 80-some years after it happened, people still talked about Tom Thompson. Guides would mention him on canoe tours, point out Canoe Lake, tell the story to tourists who'd never heard it. But the version they told visitors wasn't the whole story. That's what the old-timers would say, the rangers who'd been there for decades. They pull you aside at the end of a long day and tell you what they'd heard, what their predecessors had told them, the details that didn't make it into the official accounts. I didn't believe most of it at first. It sounded like campfire stories, the kind of folklore that builds up around any mystery that goes unsolved long enough. But the more summers I spent there, the more I started to notice things that didn't quite add up. Thompson disappeared on July 8, 1907. Sunday afternoon. He was staying at Mowat Lodge on Canoe Lake, basically just a few cabins and a main building where the owner, Shannon Fraser, and his wife Minnie, ran a small operation for artists and fishermen. Thompson had been coming there for years, knew the part better than almost anyone, could navigate those lakes and portages in the dark. The story everyone knows is simple. Thompson went out alone in his canoe around noon or early afternoon. When he didn't come back by evening, people started to worry. Search parties went out. 8 days later, his body surfaced near the spot where his overturned canoe had been found. Drowning, they said. Accident. But here's what they don't usually mention. Thompson was an expert swimmer and canoeist. The lake was calm that day, and when they pulled his body up, there was a 4-inch bruise on his left temple, and fishing line was wrapped 16 times around his left ankle. The local doctor who examined the body said drowning. Didn't mention the head wound in his initial report. When questioned later, he said Thompson must have hit his head on a rock or the side of the canoe. But Thompson's friends didn't buy it. Neither did his family. One of the old rangers told me about the night before Thompson disappeared. There'd been a party at the lodge, drinking, cards, the usual. Thompson got into an argument with Shannon Fraser. Loud enough that other people heard it, though accounts differ on what it was about. Money, some said. Others claimed it was about Fraser's wife, suggested Thompson had been too friendly with her. Whatever it was, it got heated, physical, according to some versions, and the next day, Thompson was dead. I asked the ranger if he thought Fraser killed him. He shrugged, stared out at the lake. All I know is Thompson's skull had a hole in it that looked an awful lot like someone hit him with something heavy. And Fraser had a temper when he drank. And Thompson died less than 12 hours after they fought. So why wasn't Fraser arrested? Because the doctor said drowning. Because Fraser had connections. Because it was easier to call it an accident than to investigate a murder in the middle of nowhere. He lit a cigarette, exhaled slowly. Plus, there's the burial issue. That's the part that really bothered me. Still does. Thompson was buried quickly. Too quickly, people said, in a shallow grave near Canoe Lake. But his family wanted him buried in the family plot down south. So supposedly, his body was exhumed after a few days and moved. Except, in 1956, some workers were digging near the original gravesite and found human remains. Skeletal remains with a hole in the left temple. They had them examined by specialists who determined it was a middle-aged Caucasian male. Thompson was 39 when he died, Caucasian, and that hole in the skull could have been from a bullet or a blow from a blunt object. The Ontario government insisted the remains weren't Thompson's. said they were from a young indigenous man who'd been buried there years earlier, but they never explained how they knew that or why the forensic analysis said otherwise. And they never exhumed the official grave in the family plot to verify Thompson's body was actually there. So either Thompson is still buried at Canoe Lake and his family's grave is empty, or those weren't his bones in 1956, or, and this is what some people believe, someone killed him, buried him in a panic, then lied about moving the body to cover it up. My second summer there, I started paying attention to the stories guests would tell. Not the ones asking about Thompson, the ones who'd seen something. It was always the same basic account: early morning or dusk. Mist on the water, and a gray canoe moving slowly across Canoe Lake, a figure paddling in the old style, smooth and silent. People would call out, "Wave!" The figure never responded. And if you looked away for a second, when you looked back, the canoe would be gone, just vanished. No time to reach shore, nowhere to hide, just gone. I dismissed it as wishful thinking, people seeing what they expected to see. But then I saw it myself. It was late August, my third summer. I was doing an early morning patrol, checking campsites around Canoe Lake. The sun was just starting to come up, mist hanging low over the water, and I saw it, a gray canoe, single paddler, moving north across the lake, maybe 200 meters from shore. I raised my binoculars, trying to get a better look. The paddler was wearing dark clothes, some kind of hat, paddling with that old-fashioned J-stroke Thompson was famous for. I called out, "Standard procedure, make sure everyone's okay, check if they need anything." No response. The paddler didn't even turn. I lowered the binoculars to mark the direction, planning to intercept when they reached the far shore. Took maybe 3 seconds. When I raised the binoculars again, the canoe was gone. I scanned the entire lake. Nothing. No canoe, no paddler, no ripples on the water where they should have been. I radioed the other rangers, asked if anyone had checked in early, if there were any solo paddlers registered in that area. There weren't. I filed a report standard procedure but didn't mention the part about the canoe disappearing. Just said I'd seen someone on the water who didn't respond to hailing but lost visual contact. My supervisor read it and gave me this look. "Canoe Lake?" he asked. "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "Gray canoe?" I felt my stomach drop. "How did you know?" "Because you're the fourth ranger this summer to report the same thing." He pulled out a file, showed me 3 other reports. Different rangers, different dates, all describing the same thing. Gray canoe, single paddler, early morning or dusk, disappears when you look away. "What is it?" I asked. He closed the file. Officially, trick of the light, mist on the water, people seeing what they expect to see. And unofficially, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Tom Thompson died on that lake." And some people think he never really left it. I started researching after that. Not just the ghost stories, the actual case. Old newspaper archives, witness statements, letters Thompson's family had saved. The more I dug, the less the official story made sense. Thompson's body was found floating in a specific position, upright, not prone like a typical drowning victim. The fishing line around his ankle was wrapped methodically, not tangled like it would be from an accident. And that bruise on his temple, 4 inches long, deliberate and precise. Dr. Howland, who examined the body, initially reported the head wound. But in later statements, he downplayed it, said it wasn't significant. Some researchers found that suspicious, especially since Howland was friendly with Shannon Fraser. Then there was the timeline. Thompson went out around noon on July 8th. His overturned canoe was found that same afternoon, but his body didn't surface until July 16th, 8 days later. Bodies don't usually stay submerged that long in summer water. The gases that build up during decomposition cause them to rise within a few days. 8 days is possible, but unusual. Unless someone weighted the body down, kept it submerged deliberately. And that fishing line around the ankle? Some people think that's exactly what it was, a weight or an anchor point for a weight that eventually came loose and let the body rise. I found the letter Thompson had written to a friend about a week before he died. He mentioned the Frasers, said things were getting complicated at the lodge, didn't elaborate. But he also mentioned he was planning to leave soon, maybe not come back next summer. Had he threatened to leave? Was Fraser worried about losing his most famous guest, the draw that brought other artists to the lodge? Or was it something more personal? Some people believed Thompson was having an affair with Minnie Fraser. Others said Shannon Fraser owed Thompson money and couldn't pay it back. Still others claimed Thompson had seen or heard something he shouldn't have, some illegal activity Fraser was involved in. Whatever the reason, the argument on July 7th was real. Multiple witnesses confirmed it, and less than 24 hours later, Thompson was dead. My last summer in the park, I met an old woman at the visitor center. She must have been in her 80s, frail but sharp. She asked if I did tours of Canoe Lake. I said yes, sometimes. She told me her grandmother had worked at Mowat Lodge in 1917, had been there the summer Thompson died. She never talked about it, the woman said, not until right before she passed. But she told my mother something, made her promise not to repeat it while anyone involved was still alive. What did she say? The woman looked at me for a long moment, like she was deciding whether to trust me. She said she heard Shannon Fraser and Tom Thompson arguing. Said Fraser grabbed a paddle, swung it at Thompson's head. Said she heard the crack from the kitchen. My mouth went dry. Did she see it? No, but she heard Thompson fall. Heard Fraser cursing. And the next day, when Thompson was missing, she saw Fraser burning something in the fire pit behind the lodge. A paddle, she thought, broken in half. Why didn't she tell anyone? Because Fraser was her employer. Because it was 1917 and she was a young woman with no power. Because she was afraid. Did she tell the police later? She tried. Went to them after the funeral. But Fraser had already told his story. Thompson went out alone, must have drowned, tragic accident. And the doctor had signed off on it. Who was going to believe a lodge worker over a business owner and a doctor? The woman looked out the window toward the lake. My grandmother said she never slept well after that. Said she'd hear Thompson's canoe sometimes, late at night. The sound of a paddle dipping into water over and over. And she'd look out her window and see him paddling across the lake in the moonlight, always alone, always heading north toward the spot where they found him. Did she think it was really his ghost? She thought he was looking for something, or someone. Thought maybe he didn't know he was dead, or knew but couldn't leave until. She stopped, shook her head. I don't know. She never finished that thought. The woman left after that. I never saw her again. But I thought about what she'd said for a long time, about Thompson looking for something, about the sound of a paddle in the dark. And I thought about that morning I saw the gray canoe. The way the paddler moved, smooth and rhythmic, the way he ignored my call, the way he vanished. My last week at the park, I went back to Canoe Lake early one morning. Same spot I'd been that day. I saw the canoe. Mist on the water, sun just rising. I stood there for 20 minutes, watching, waiting, and then I saw it. Movement in the mist. The outline of a canoe, a single figure paddling with that distinctive J-stroke. This time, I didn't call out, didn't raise my binoculars, just watched. The canoe moved north, slow and steady, toward the deeper part of the lake, and I realized it was following the exact path from Mowat Lodge to the spot where Thompson's body had been found, the same path he would have taken that afternoon in July 1917 if he'd been going out to fish or paint or just paddle alone, or the same path someone would take if they were dumping a body in the deepest part of a lake. The canoe reached the spot and stopped. The figure just sat there, paddle across the gunwales, completely still. I felt something cold settle in my chest, because I understood then what the old woman's grandmother had meant. He's looking for something, or he's remembering, playing it out over and over, the moment he went into the water, the moment he realized what had happened, the moment he died. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been 20. But eventually the mist thickened, and when it cleared, the canoe was gone. I left Algonquin after that summer, finished my degree, got a job in the city, put the whole thing behind me, or tried to. But sometimes I still think about Tom Thompson, about the fight and the paddle and the fishing line wrapped 16 times around his ankle, about the body that stayed down too long, and the grave that might be empty, and the forensic evidence that disappeared into bureaucratic silence. And I think about the gray canoe and the figure paddling alone and the way he stopped at that exact spot over and over, like he's trapped in a loop he can't escape. Because if Thompson was murdered, and I believe he was, then his death wasn't just an unsolved case. It was a wound that never healed, a question that never got answered. And maybe some part of him is still out there, still trying to tell someone what happened, still paddling across Canoe Lake in the early morning mist, hoping someone will finally see him. Really see him, and understand I don't go to Algonquin anymore, can't bring myself to, because I know if I went back to Canoe Lake at dawn, if I stood on that shore and waited, I'd see him again. The gray canoe, the lone paddler, the smooth J-stroke moving through the mist, and this time I might see his face. And I'm not sure I want to know what expression I'd find there. Anger? Confusion? Fear? Or just the quiet resignation of someone who's been dead for over a century and still can't rest. Still can't leave the lake that killed him, or that someone killed him in. The truth is, somewhere at the bottom of Canoe Lake, in the mud, in the cold, in the dark. And maybe that's where Tom Thompson is too, despite what the government says. Still there, still waiting, still paddling through the mist every morning, following the same path, hoping this time will be different, hoping someone will finally listen, but no one ever does. We just watch the gray canoe disappear into the fog and tell ourselves it was a trick of the light. Because believing anything else means accepting that some injustices never get resolved, that some people die and never get justice, that some ghosts are real and they're trapped here forever, repeating their last moments over and over because the living were too afraid or too corrupt or too indifferent to find out what really happened. I think Tom Thompson is one of those ghosts, and I think Canoe Lake is his prison, and I think he'll be there long after we're all gone, paddling through the morning mist, searching for something he'll never find. Peace, justice, truth, or just someone who believes him. My mother talks about that day sometimes, when she's had too much wine and the house is quiet. She'll get this distant look and say things like, "I should have brought her with me," or 2 hours, that's all it was, and I'll know she's back there again. Back to October 3rd, 1984. Back to the moment she came home and called my sister's name and got no answer. I wasn't born yet. Christine was my half-sister from Mom's first marriage. I came along 6 years after she died, and I grew up with her absence the way some kids grow up with a living sibling. She was always there, just not physically. Her room stayed untouched for years, her school photo on the mantle, her name spoken carefully, like it might break something if said too loud. But it wasn't until I was older that I learned the details. The real details, not the sanitized version you tell a child. Mom and my brother, Christine's full brother, had gone to visit Dad in jail that afternoon. He was doing time for something stupid, fraud or theft, I don't remember exactly. They'd been gone since early afternoon, 2 hours, maybe 2.5. Christine was 9, old enough to be home alone for a bit, responsible kid, never got in trouble. The plan was simple. Christine would come home from school, lock the door, do her homework, watch TV. Mom would be back by dinner. That's it. When they got home around 4:15, Christine's backpack was on the kitchen table. Her shoes were by the door, placed neatly side by side the way she always left them. The house was quiet. Mom called her name, checked her room, the bathroom, the basement. Nothing. She checked again, moving faster now. Called louder, still nothing. By 4:30, she knew something was wrong. By 4:45, the police were there. The search started immediately. Neighbors, police, volunteers. They covered the neighborhood, knocked on every door, checked every yard and shed and garage. The bus driver confirmed Christine had gotten off at her stop, walking toward the house with her backpack. After that, no one saw her. Mom said the waiting was the worst part. Those first few days when she still hoped still believed Christine would walk through the door with some explanation, some story about getting confused or lost or going to a friend's house. But Christine never came home. They found her on New Year's Eve 3 months later. A farmer checking his field saw something near the fence line, 55 kilometers from our town. By the time the police got there and confirmed what he'd found, 1984 was almost over. Mom doesn't talk about what state Christine was in when they found her. I've never asked. Some things you don't need to know in detail. What I do know is that she'd been sexually assaulted, that she'd been killed, that whoever took her from our house that afternoon had driven her far away and done terrible things and left her in a field like she was nothing. The investigation was massive. Everyone was interviewed, family, friends, neighbors, teachers. They looked at sex offenders in the area, ran background checks, followed every lead. And eventually they focused on a man named Guy Paul Morin. He lived next door, kept to himself mostly. Kept bees, played the clarinet at odd hours. Mom said he'd always seemed a bit off, but harmless. The kind of person you notice because they're awkward, not because they're dangerous, but the police built a case. They had fiber evidence, witness testimony, circumstantial connections. In 1992, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Mom said she felt numb when they read the verdict. Not relief exactly, but something close to it. The monster had a name and a face and a prison cell. It was over. Except it wasn't. Morin's lawyers appealed, new evidence emerged, questions about the investigation. And in 1995, DNA testing, still relatively new then, proved definitively that Morin hadn't done it. He was innocent. They let him out, apologized, paid him compensation. And just like that, Christine's killer was unknown again. I grew up knowing that story, knowing my sister had been murdered by someone who was still out there, still free. It shaped everything, where we lived, how careful Mom was, the way she'd check on me constantly when I was young. But I never really understood the full weight of it until 2020. I was living in Toronto by then, working my own life. Mom called me on a Tuesday afternoon, which was unusual. She never called during work hours. Her voice was strange when I picked up. Flat. Empty. They found him, she said. I knew immediately what she meant. Christine? Yes. I left work early, drove to her place. When I got there, she was sitting at the kitchen table, completely still, staring at nothing. The detective had just left. He'd told her everything. They'd used genetic genealogy, built a family tree from DNA at the crime scene, tracked it through databases, and they'd found him. Calvin Hoover. The name meant nothing to me, but it meant everything to Mom. He worked with your father, she said quietly. They were friends. I felt something cold spread through my chest. His wife babysat Christine sometimes. They came over for dinners, barbecues. He was at her birthday party that spring. She looked at me then, and her eyes were completely dry, but there was something shattered in them. He helped search for her. After she disappeared, he helped search. I didn't know what to say. He was at the funeral, she continued. I remember him. He stood in the back. He looked sad. Her voice cracked. I actually thanked him for coming, for being there for us. The full horror of it was settling in. This wasn't a stranger. This was someone they knew, someone they trusted, someone who'd been inside our house, who'd held Christine when she was a baby, who knew her schedule and our routines, and exactly when she'd be home alone. Where is he? I asked. Did they arrest him? Mom shook her head. He's dead. Killed himself in 2015. 5 years ago. So there would be no trial, no confession, no explanation. Just a name and the certainty that he'd gotten away with it. The detective gave us a file. Not everything. There were things too graphic, too invasive, but enough. Timeline, evidence, how they'd connected Hoover to the crime. I read it that night while Mom slept, or tried to. And the more I read, the worse it got. Hoover had known Dad was in jail, known Mom would be visiting that afternoon, known Christine would be home alone at 3003 when the school bus dropped her off. He'd been to our house enough times to know the layout, which doors were usually locked, where Christine's room was. The police believed he'd been watching, waiting for the right opportunity. October 3rd was that opportunity. Christine came home, put her backpack on the kitchen table, took off her shoes, and then either she heard a knock on the door or someone was already inside. Either way, she encountered Calvin Hoover. Did she smile when she saw him? Did she feel relieved that an adult was there? Mr. Hoover, her dad's friend from work, here to check on her? The file didn't say exactly what happened inside the house, just that Christine was taken alive in Hoover's car and driven 55 kilometers away while Mom was heading home, while neighbors were watching TV, while the world kept turning like everything was normal. I tried to imagine it. Christine in the passenger seat, maybe confused at first, but not scared, not yet, because it was Mr. Hoover, safe. But at some point, she would have realized, would have understood. The file didn't include details about what he did to her. I'm grateful for that. But it confirmed she'd been sexually assaulted. That she'd been killed, that her body had been left in that field like trash. And then Hoover went home, kissed his wife, had dinner, went to work the next day. And when Mom called him crying, asking if he'd seen Christine, he said no. So sorry, let me know if I can help. For 3 months he pretended, and after they found Christine, he pretended more, attended the funeral, offered condolences, looked appropriately sad. The file included witness statements from the investigation. Someone mentioned seeing Hoover's car near our neighborhood that afternoon. Someone else remembered he'd seemed nervous at the funeral, kept checking his watch. But nothing concrete enough to pursue. And then the investigation zeroed in on Guy Paul Morin, and Hoover faded into the background. He lived 31 more years, got up every morning, went to work, came home, had holidays and birthdays and normal life, while Mom woke up every day knowing her daughter was dead and her killer was free. While Christine stayed 9 years old forever, frozen in that school photo on the mantle. I asked Mom if she remembered anything specific about Hoover, any sign, any hint that he was capable of this. She thought for a long time. Then she said, "He was at the hospital when Christine was born, brought flowers. Your father was proud, wanted to show her off to his work friends. I have a photo somewhere, Hoover holding her, smiling. She's wrapped in a blue blanket, maybe an hour old." She went quiet. How do you hold someone's baby? And then, 9 years later, she didn't finish. I don't think there was a way to finish that sentence. The detective said there was no evidence Hoover had done this to anyone else. No other victims, no pattern, just Christine. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. That this wasn't compulsion or addiction or whatever excuse serial killers use. That he made a choice once to destroy a child, and then just moved on, lived with it, buried it, pretended. Mom started having nightmares after the identification. She'd wake up gasping, and when I stayed over, I'd hear her in the next room crying. She told me once what she dreamed. She dreamed about a barbecue in our old backyard, summer of 1984. Hoover was there with his wife. Christine was running around, playing, and in the dream, Mom watched Hoover watch Christine, and she could see it in his eyes. He was already planning it, already thinking about when and how. I told her it was just a dream, that we can't know what he was thinking back then. But she said he came to her birthday party in April, 6 months before he killed her. He brought her a present, watched her open it, and he was already thinking about it. I know he was. Maybe she was right. Maybe Hoover had been fantasizing about it for months, waiting for the right opportunity. Or maybe it was impulsive, a terrible decision made in a moment and then hidden for decades. Either way, he never confessed, never showed remorse, just lived his life until 2015 when he hanged himself, and whatever demons he had went with him. The case is officially closed now, solved, technically, even though there was no trial, no justice, no answers beyond a name. Mom took down the old photos after that. Any picture with Hoover in it, birthday parties, barbecues, work events, she threw them away. I watched her do it one afternoon, methodically tearing each one in half before dropping it in the trash. When she got to the hospital photo, Hoover holding newborn Christine, she stared at it for a long time. Then she tore it up too, slowly, piece by piece. "I don't want his face in my house," she said. I helped her clean out boxes after that. Found more photos, more memories contaminated by his presence. We threw them all away. It felt like we were erasing him, or trying to. But you can't erase what he did, can't undo the hole he left in our family. Christine would be 49 now. I try to imagine her sometimes, what she'd look like, what she'd be doing if we'd be close. But I can't picture it. She's frozen at 9 forever. Sometimes I drive past our old house. Different family lives there now. They've painted it, changed the landscaping. It looks normal, happy. You'd never know what happened there. That a 9-year-old girl came home from school and put her backpack on the kitchen table and took off her shoes and then disappeared forever. That someone she trusted, someone who'd held her as a baby, had been waiting for exactly that moment. That he drove her far away and destroyed her and left her in a field while her mother was driving home thinking about what to make for dinner. The new family probably doesn't even know, or if they do, they've made peace with it. Houses can't be evil after all, just places where evil things happened once. But I know, and I can't look at that house without seeing Christine's shoes by the door, her backpack on the table. The emptiness when Mom called her name and got no answer. Mom doesn't drive past anymore, hasn't been back to that street in years. She says it's because it's out of the way, no reason to go there. But I know it's because she can't bear to see it. Can't bear to remember those 2 hours, the 2 hours she was gone, the 2 hours Christine needed her, the 2 hours that changed everything. She still says it sometimes, when she's had too much wine. 2 hours, that's all it was. Like if she'd just come home earlier or brought Christine with her or asked a neighbor to watch her, everything would be different. But I don't think it would have been. I think Hoover was waiting, planning, and if it wasn't that day, it would have been another day, another opportunity, because predators are patient. And the worst ones don't look like monsters, they look like friends, co-workers, neighbors. They hold your baby at the hospital and smile for photos and bring presents to birthday parties, and then they wait. And when the moment comes, when you're 2 hours away and your daughter is home alone and no one is watching, they take everything. I don't have kids, don't plan to, Mom understands, doesn't push. Because how do you bring a child into a world where this can happen? Where someone you trust can turn out to be the thing you should have feared most? Where a 9-year-old girl can come home from school and disappear and spend 3 months in a field and no one notices, no one finds her, no one saves her. I know that's not logical. I know bad things happen whether you have kids or not. I know most people are good, most children are safe, but I can't stop thinking about Christine's shoes by the door, about how she took them off carefully, placing them side by side, doing what she was supposed to do, about how she probably felt grown up, being trusted to stay home alone, about how she had no idea what was about to happen, no idea that someone she knew, someone safe, was about to become the last person she'd ever see. And that's what I can't forgive. Not just what Hoover did, though that's unforgivable enough, but that he pretended, that he hid behind friendship and normalcy and trust, that he made Mom thank him for coming to the funeral, that he lived 31 more years while Christine stayed dead, that he chose to die rather than face what he'd done. Mom keeps Christine's photo on the mantle still, the school picture from that last year. She's smiling, missing one front tooth, wearing a blue sweater. 9 years old forever. And every time I visit, every time I see that photo, I think about the shoes by the door and the backpack on the table and the moment Mom called Christine's name and got no answer. The moment everything changed. The moment we lost her, not to a stranger or a random act of violence, but to someone we knew, someone we trusted, someone who'd held her when she was an hour old and smiled for the camera and waited 9 years to destroy her. And I think that's the real horror. Not that monsters exist, but that they look just like everyone else, and you never know, you never ever know until it's too late.